All right, welcome. Good morning. It's time for our 48th Coffee with the Commissioner event, our weekly coffee. We typically go out in town and do these at Denny's, McDonald's, or Hardee's. We do it with people sitting live around a table. We chat about the issues in District 1 and issues that are on constituents' minds, potholes, development, what's going on, what's going to be built here. Unfortunately, as everyone in the world knows now, COVID-19 has put a stop to most in-person meetings. So luckily, there's a great digital platform called Zoom, and now everyone in the world's an expert on it because we've all been using it. And we're doing now our coffees virtually, and we do that for safety of constituents and for staff. But we do appreciate the opportunity to do this. We reach a wider audience, and we're able to really delve into a lot of different topics as it pertains to COVID-19. So this morning, a very, very important topic that we're going to get to, and we have a very special guest this morning to discuss it, is our elections. Really, you can think of nothing more fundamental to being an American citizen than having the right and really the obligation to vote. We're a constitutional republic, and every 2 years in many cases, and every 4 years in others, and sometimes every 6 years, we have elections, and we represent the people that go and represent us and run our government. So COVID-19 presenting a challenge around the country. We've read about it. So we've been talking about a lot of the different impacts COVID-19 have had on the restaurant business, on the bar industry, on schools. On last couple of weeks back, we had about the churches. So now we're going to talk about something really important: elections. And so no one better to join us to discuss that than our own Escambia County Elections Supervisor, Mr. David Stafford. David's here this morning. Welcome, David. Good morning.
Thanks, Commissioner. Good to be here.
Thank you for being here. And by the way, we're gonna get back to David in just a second. We also have County Administrator Janice Gilley here, and then we have Escambia Emergency Manager Eric Gilmore here as well to discuss the latest updates with the county. As everyone knows, this is a very fluid situation. Lots going on, lots of data coming at us from a lot of different directions. So we'll go ahead and do that. But before we do, I just want to congratulate David Stafford. He was recently reelected without opposition too. I believe it's your 4th term, or is this your 5th term?
I'll be starting my 5th term, actually.
Congratulations.
Wow.
We appreciate everything that you do. You've been a rock over there, and Escambia County, we don't have problems here with our elections, and it's because of your leadership. So congratulations to you. Thanks for being here. And without further ado, Janice, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know there's a lot going on in the county, and looking forward to your update this morning. Welcome.
Thank you. As many of you know, we've started the Mask Up Escambia campaign, and we want to make sure that everyone knows that we do have masks available at all of our libraries: Pensacola Library, Tryon Branch, Century, the Genealogy Branch, the Molino Branch, Southwest Branch, Westside Branch. Those are available from 2 until 6 p.m. We also have masks available at the Escambia Extension office from 8 to 5, and then the Brownsville Community Center and the Evanwood Community Center. Those are both available 8 to 5. And then on the beach at Tower number 4 on Casino Beach, our lifeguards have face masks if folks would like them while they're out enjoying the beach area. I do always like to mention our testing sites that are available in the community, and some of them are out because they're outdoors. They are weather permitting, and that would be like the Ascension Medical Group one. We also have the Community Health Northwest. Wednesday, today, July 8th, at Addicts Court, they'll be doing those testing, walk-up tests, and that would be from 9 a.m. to noon. There is no pre-screening required there. We have the drive-through and walk-up testing at Pensacola State College and Century, and that's from 9 a.m. to noon today as well. Baptist Healthcare continues to have their screening center, and you can call them at the 434-4080. UWF, same thing with their parking lot. Unfortunately, some of the lines are a little bit long, but they have tests until they run out. The Florida Department of Health in Escambia County has tests available this week, July 6th through the 10th. They'll be available at West Gregory Street. And then there's also the walk-up testing now at Publix. We as a county and the Bay Center are working with the Department of Health to do our best to get a testing center set up in the Civic Center so that folks will not have to sit in their cars for long lengths.
Good.
Or we won't be interrupted based on weather. And then I just always like to mention that One Blood is still available to do the antibody testing. And then one of the other things that we're starting to provide in our daily update, because we had a request for it, is our number of employees that have tested positive and that are out or that are out due to testing and awaiting results. And so as we continue to monitor, public safety and corrections to make sure that we are still on green for the community, we'll be providing those numbers as well. And then Commissioner Burgash, at your direction and the board's direction, Eric and Laura and our web folks are working on an Escambia County dashboard. I've already seen the beta on that. We are having a little bit of an issue with some of the information. And part of that is because our hospitals are so good. They are regional hospitals. And because they're regional hospitals, they may not necessarily only have Escambia County residents. And so we need to work through, some of the information related to COVID patients in their hospital, in their actual hospitals. And we need to work through whether or not those are just Escambia residents or those are other, community residents. And so the dashboard may look a little different than some of the other communities, but we are continuing to work on that.
And Janice, let me just interject for folks that are watching that may not have seen the meeting where I requested this, and it's my understanding one of my counterparts did as well. A number of counties, particularly Charlotte County in South Florida, there's some commissioners down there that put together a dashboard, and it's important for the citizens to know this because we see a lot in the media, and a lot of it is designed to shock you and get your attention. That's what sells newspapers and advertising on video and TV. And folks conflate the idea of a high number of new tests with the hospitalizations going up and the deaths going up. And a lot of folks are conflating what's happening or what happened in New York and what's happening right now in Houston with what's going on here. And every time I've spoken to Mark Faulkner or Don Rudolph or Gay Nord, they say, they're hanging in there. They're well, they're in the green, as you would say, according to the mayor's chart. So what we're going to do with the dashboard is we're going to talk about the total number of beds in Escambia County, our big three hospitals, right? The total number of beds, and then the total number that are occupied by COVID patients, and then the total number of ventilators, and then the total number occupied by COVID patients, and then the total number of ICU suites, and the total number that are occupied by COVID patients. Because as the doctors said on our coffee 2 weeks ago, they're designed to run at, a pretty high capacity. That's how they generate enough revenue to pay the gigantic staff. So if they're half empty, that's going to result in layoffs. That's going to be a big problem for these hospitals. So when you see the video of people and you see the media really trumping up the new, the number of new positive cases, folks get the wrong idea about exactly how many COVID patients might be in the hospital. So that's the reason we've requested it. Everyone can look at the raw data and make their own determination. There are folks that are very, very concerned, and they should be. And there are folks like me that want all the data, and we have a hard time grasping because we're asking questions and not getting answers. So the attempt there, Janice, I believe will be to illustrate that so that folks in real time know how many of these hospital beds are really being taken by active COVID patients. And the other thing I want to talk about is recovery too. We have to have a slot on there that talks about recovery. It's my understanding Illinois has a protocol, and maybe we could adopt that 6 weeks after a positive case, because that's typically how long it takes to resolve these things. 6 weeks after, if that person hasn't died, it's a recovery, right? And so we need to talk about recovery because no one talks about recovery. I asked when we had the doctors on, and we heard different things about how long it's in the viruses in their bloodstream, and but no one can really answer questions like how long they're contagious and how long will it be in the bloodstream. So a lot of these things we just don't know. But sorry to go off on a little tangent there, but I wanted to make sure people realize that's what we're talking about. Is that about the long and short of it, Janice? Is that what we're going to add?
Yeah, we're trying. I will share with you that one of the concerns is that, quite frankly, any bed can be turned into an ICU bed. And Eric can be a little bit more technical about that. So I think, like I said, some of the issues that we're trying to resolve is if they have 400 beds available, quite frankly, that means they could have 400 ICU beds. Right. And so that there are definitions and semantics related to ICU. And then also and like I said, Eric is more than welcome to weigh in on this. There are just some other details in terms of the patients. So I'm using a number. This is for example. Let's say they have 40 patients that are COVID patients in their hospital. And maybe only 5 of those are in ICU. But for our purposes in Escambia County, maybe only 10 of those are Escambia County residents. The other 30 might be Escambia, Alabama, Baldwin County, or Santa Rosa. And so that's where we're getting some issues in terms of, numbers and cross mixing, because we've tried to look at this pandemic for the last several months as a county by county, geographic area. Well, we're very fortunate. Our hospitals, they don't look that way. They
Right.
look at healthcare for people in the region. And so they may service people as far away as Okaloosa, or maybe even, over the other side of Baldwin County, maybe Fairhope in that area. So that's part of the issue right now. I would not want to scare people in Escambia County that 40 of the people in the hospital that are COVID patients are all Escambia residents,
Sure.
when it may be a much wider geographic area. And so that, some of those counties, like a Charlotte County, where they are very, I don't want to say isolated, but they're in a position where they may only have one hospital. Or, Okaloosa that may only have one hospital. When they say they have 10 patients, they're probably all from Okaloosa. And so that's kind of where we're having some issues. And Eric, I'm happy for you to weigh in.
Good morning, Eric, and welcome. And please, by all means, give us an update on testing and anything else you'd like to add.
No, so Janice hit the nail on the head. We do have a regional hospital system, and that's something that because of the regional hospital system, everybody comes from far away to our hospitals. So the numbers are not going to be reflective of just Escambia County and snapshot just Escambia County. So those are some of the things we're trying to weigh through. We are working with the hospitals. We talk to the hospitals weekly, the CEOs and everything, just to check in. We have a weekly call in. How's everybody doing? Not to say that we don't check in daily with counterparts that I check in with, and everybody's always green, and they have a med surge plan. They're ready to go at any time. And it was even discussed, should we even talk about med surge beds? And the hospital CEO said, no, to the general public, they don't understand what a med surge bed is, so we don't want to confuse them even further. So the hospitals are looking at, I've requested for the ICU capacity with COVID patients, and they're weighing it right now and seeing if it's more confusing or less confusing. But the general purpose the hospitals want to put out there is that any bed could be ICU. They have a med surge plan and are ready to go at any minute. I can go out there right now from the ACA website and pull that number of how many beds are available right now off the ACA website. Total beds available in Escambia County. I can go out there and tell you how many total ICU beds right now. There's nowhere out there unless the hospitals absolutely tell me this many COVID patients. I can't get that information. So the hospitals they're saying that they have the capability, they have the capacity, and it's to them, it's not a big concern of putting that number out there versus just what the total number is. So, but we're working through those things. The dashboard, we're hoping to get that for available to view today. We did do the beta dashboard.
Right on.
Information. It's got good information. So it's a place, instead of going to the Florida dashboard, and then if you don't know that there's tabs on the Florida dashboard to click on individually and click on Escambia County and select all this stuff, you can go to Escambia County website, go to our dashboard, and bam, all Escambia County information right there.
I like it.
Yes, total positives, total negatives, total beds available. How much testing's being done. So we're working on that. So you have a one-spot snapshot of Escambia County.
No, that's what we desperately need, and really appreciate your efforts toward that. And if I might say, for my 2 cents worth, I get it. We're a region. I mean, we're a regional area. We're not just Escambia. Everything doesn't stop at our borders. I mean, our hospitals do service Baldwin County, Escambia County, Alabama, Santa Rosa County. Let's face it. I mean, they've got a couple small hospitals, but we are a regional. So for my part, I'd rather just have the number, and you could have a little disclaimer, a little asterisk that says may not necessarily be all Escambia County residents. But the bottom line is we just want to know, because that's the hospital we're going to, right? So where is it at? How many COVID patients are there? I would not waste a lot of time disaggregating that. Okay, well, this guy's from, Baldwin County. We don't care. Just how many beds are being taken up with COVID patients. And if it's easier to do it that way, I think that'd be fine for my part. Maybe you check with the other board members as well. Hey, Janice, I got a question on Facebook Live, and it's a good one. So I'll ask it. It's from Amanda. She goes, Walton County is giving the option option Monday for all inmates to be tested. And this includes Escambia inmates, about 40 of ours who are housed there. According to the Walton County Sheriff's Office, 88 were tested. Have we considered doing the same thing in Escambia County? And if not, why not? It would seem they should have the same option here that our inmates have in Walton County. That's a very good question. What would you say to that?
So the areas in particular where we've had infection, I mean, I say infection, that's not the right word, but where we have had people that have had symptoms, or we have had, positive tests, we have offered. Right now, I think it's maximum security is the area in particular, and we tested all of those inmates. We did have several inmates that did refuse to be tested.
Sure.
Yeah, which is their civil right to do so, as it is with any citizen. And so we have been offering it in the areas where there has been a case or there has been, a confirmed case. So far, the other areas, from what we can tell, we've not had cases in those areas. And so because of, there are issues in terms of making sure that you have enough tests. And until you have an infection or you have, I hate to use the word infection, until you have a confirmed case in an area, it's best not to use the test unless you have a confirmed case. Because when you have a confirmed case, when you don't have a confirmed case today, and you may have a confirmed case next week, now we're retesting. And so we're not necessarily utilizing the test. And I mean, Eric might be able to speak to that a little bit better as his experience in epidemiology, but it's better to not test until you know that you have a confirmed case, because you may test them today, no confirmed cases, everyone comes up negative, but yet they have exposure 2 days from now, and now we're retesting. Do you
I do.
So,
I would think the layperson would say, well, you've got to get on a regimen, especially when they're all locked in together at the same building, close quarters. It'll have to come to a point where the testing becomes so widely, readily available that you can do it. It's my understanding FDA just approved a 15-minute test. It's going to
I
come.
hope so.
Yeah, it's going to come to the point where everyone gets tested on a regular basis, because this thing just moves so quickly. Last night, they're reporting, the World Health Organization says now they don't know for sure, but they believe it could be aerosolized and very, very tiny particles that hang in the air. They don't know how long. So there's a lot of unknowns with this, but I thought that was a good question. And for my part, Janice, I'd like to have maximum testing in that jail. I've been concerned from day one about an outbreak in that jail, because we got people coming in, going out, in and out, and they go to pockets of poverty in the community, right? And then it gets spread there. And then we got a big problem at the hospitals. Because we know it disproportionately affects some communities more than others. That's what I read on Rick's blog yesterday, as a matter of fact. So there's that. But I appreciate that. Eric, a quick update on the hurricane. We're going to go to David Stafford and talk about this election coming up. Anything you want to tell the folks about hurricane preparedness in this season?
Absolutely. So real quick, as everybody's aware, we just had our 5th named storm, and here it is only July 8th. And so everybody, now why none of them have been hurricanes, they've all been tropical storms, and most of them in the Atlantic. So for our latest occurrence, where we had Cristobal that went just west of us into Louisiana, and we had some coastal beach erosion. I'm asking everybody to be vigilant out there, watch the weather. These things could pop up anywhere at any time. Obviously, the Cristobal popped up Yucatan, come up in the Gulf, and created a little bit of havoc with us with some gusts, some huge wind gusts. And we're doing a lot of shelter COVID planning because of COVID-19. Our shelter capacity looks a little different than it has in the past. And we're pushing the message that know your zone. Make sure you know what zone you're in, if you're in evacuation zone or not, storm surge and all that. 2, know your home. Your home, if it was built after 2002, or you've done modifications to it to mitigate it, it might be the best place for you to ride the storm out in, right, versus going to a shelter that's going to be a little cramped and packed. And especially with COVID-19 going on, and we try not to congregate, and we're going to try to respect everybody's 60 square foot space that DOH and CDC and FDM's asked us to accommodate. But understanding that 60 square foot has cut us down to 1/3 capacity. Right. So we've lost 2/3 of our shelters in doing that. Now, having said that, school district's been great in identifying other spaces we can go into, and I appreciate Superintendent Thomas helping us out with that, and been a great partner in that. But it's still going to be cramped. So those 3 things, know your zone, know your home, and know your plan. Have a plan now. Don't wait till the last minute. So, but like I said, I know they say this is above normal hurricane season, and we've had 5 named storms, but hey, all it takes is one. It could be a below normal, below average. It just takes one to ruin your day. So just everybody be aware out there.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Colorado State, they do the prediction every year. Oh my God, it's going to be terrible. Then halfway through, they always get a pass. Okay, we've revised the prediction when they realize there hasn't been that many. It's kind of interesting. I wish I could get away with that with my lottery tickets, right? All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's comments here. David Stafford, good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience as we went through just a little county business right quick. First of all,
very, very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Well, why don't you introduce yourself to the viewers and tell us who you are, what you do, and what's happening these days?
Sure. Well, I'm going to preemptively apologize for one of my 2 dogs who is running around the house this morning.
I love
barking. So only so much I can do to control that when I'm sitting here in front of the computer. So yeah, the joys of technology. But anyway, of course, my name's David Stafford, and I've been the supervisor of elections here in Escambia County since I was elected in 2004. Began my service in January 2005. As you noted earlier, I'll begin my fifth term in January, God willing, of next year. But I will tell you, I see Eric and Janice, and they've both been very good partners with us through this COVID process. You know, we started the year, we know that every 4 years, if it's an even numbered year in the state of Florida, we're going to have a minimum of 2 statewide elections. Every 4th year, we have that 3rd election, which is the presidential preference primary. So, you know, when you say Florida and presidential election in the same sentence, you know it's going to be, you
Right.
gird yourself for quite a year. So we were already preparing for that. And then the COVID situation emerged. And you have to think back to where we were. We were in the middle of March, and it was kind of on the front end. And I don't, you know, everything seems like a blur at this point, but I think it's good to go back and revisit because, you know, we were among a handful of states that on that Tuesday, March the 17th, that were scheduled for elections. And it was one of those things you could kind of see coming. And as you all know, that election preparations start, well, literally years in advance. But, you know, that 90-day mark is really when things get going hot and heavy. For us, and it's a scale thing, of course. If it's a presidential general election, you know, the scale is just magnified. But you know, every election's an election. You're opening up 80 polling places and training poll workers and sending out vote by mail ballots and all the other things. It's just a scale. So we were deep into the preparations of that, and then all of a sudden this issue starts emerging. And then so we're trying to deal with it on the fly, just like everybody else was, just from everybody from Washington to Tallahassee to 213 Palafox Place. So anyway, so we were there, and just to get kind of again jog people's memory, Ohio was another big state that had an election scheduled that day, and then literally the weekend before, I think it was Sunday, the governor decided to postpone their election. So we were all looking to Tallahassee, what's going to happen with us. And remember, we have early voting that begins 10 days prior, and we've had ballots in the mail. People have been casting their ballots for over a month. So anyway, as you all know, we ended up going forward with that election, and we were blessed here. Because the two main things that we saw happening in other parts of the state and in other areas that were holding elections is number one, you start losing polling places. Fortunately, we only lost 2, and that was the Azalea Trace and University Pines for obvious reasons.
Sure.
So we were able through again good community partners and rapid reaction. We learned about those in the morning. This was the week prior, and so we were able to first through Azalea Trace get with the University of West Florida, identify a location there, and we were able to actually get that secured and get notices in the mail to our voters that same day. And the same thing happened with the University Pines. I think it was a day or 2 later. We were able to, through Olive Baptist Church, they were already a polling location. They agreed to host a second polling location. So we took care of those. All the other polling locations held, and then you start dealing with poll workers. So, a lot of people have the misconception that our poll workers are volunteers, and anybody who's dealt with volunteers knows that as good as they are, sometimes volunteers just choose not to show up. And when you're electing the next president, of the United States, you just can't afford to have that happen. So we do pay our poll workers. We don't pay them a lot. People don't do it for the money, but it is it's something that we do. So we train our poll workers. Again, we start that process because of the numbers of people and how we do our training. We do very individualized, hands-on training. It takes a long time to get all those people through the process. So we're in the midst of that. And so we're trained our poll workers, and we're set. We always recruit and train more than we need because we know we're going to lose some naturally through, they wake up sick or, they have to go out of town or something happens. And so we were starting to see, particularly that weekend before, that we started losing poll workers. But we were able to make do with what we had, and able to pull off the election. I think it went well, all things considered. And at the same time, we were dealing with trying to find PPE. We were like everybody else going to Walmart and Walgreens and the Dollar General store trying to find bottles of hand sanitizer and sanitary wipes and all the other stuff. And Eric was and his team over there at the emergency management were a great resource for us, because it wasn't just we couldn't just look in Escambia County. So we were dealing. I've through some of my work, I've deal with some folks at the Department of Homeland Security, and we're now part of the nation's critical infrastructure. So I started trying to call in any kind of favors that I knew there to try to get. And anyway, so I got a call. I remember I was my wife and I were having dinner, and it was Sunday night. And I got a call from a buddy of mine who said, "I got good news for you." I said, "All right, what is it?" He's like, "I got some hand sanitizer." I'm like, "Awesome."
Right on.
We start talking. And I said, "Well, where do I go to get it?" He's like, "Orlando." I said, "Okay."
Drive down there and get it.
Right down the road.
Nashville or New Orleans. Anyway, so through Eric and through our partners in Okaloosa and Santa Rosa County, we were able to actually send one person from Okaloosa down to Orlando to pick up some supplies and come back. And then it was kind of a train. We had the Santa Rosa, went to Okaloosa to pick it up, and then we picked our stuff up from Santa Rosa, and so we were able to get some. And then we had a late supply that Eric and his folks found for us, and so we kind of cobbled things together. Now we're well into the prep for the primary election on August the 18th. We have secured some additional supplies, and of course are modifying how we're going to do voting. But we are going to do in-person voting. There was a lot of discussion about how you hold elections, and one of the things that we made clear, we as my colleagues and I, is that even though we know how to do mail ballot elections in the state of Florida, we've been doing them. We've had no excuse to vote by mail since 2002. So we know how to do it. It's just a matter of scaling it. But one thing we were very clear when we wrote to the governor, and then again, this is people from all across the ideological spectrum and different parties, and we all came together as we always do, and say, here's what we think we need. And one of the things we made clear is that Florida, you can't institute an all mail ballot election, at least in our state, sort of in that compressed time frame. That's a big policy decision that takes a long time to implement correctly. So we knew, and we're certainly seeing that we've got elevated requests for vote by mail. But we know that we can handle it. Again, it's just a matter of scaling, and we've got a little bit of time to prepare, and so that's what we're in the midst of doing. But we will have in-person voting, both in early voting as well as opening up our precincts on election day. But we certainly are going to see a higher percentage of our voters are going to choose to vote by mail.
David, let me ask a question on that, because you hit a point that I think a lot of viewers are watching. They're seeing some of the Western states, Washington, Oregon, I believe, are going 100% mail ballot. And I was reading in the New York Times that it said that, election night, you might not know the winner because we've got to wait for all the ballots to come in days and possibly weeks after. Now, I thought to myself, that's strange, because in the state of Florida, correct me if I'm wrong, but if your ballot doesn't, we don't care what happens, but your ballot doesn't get here on election day, it doesn't count. Is that correct?
That's right. The one minor exception to that is if you're an overseas voter, either civilian or a member of the military that's in service overseas, then you have a 10-day window in a presidential primary and a general election. So this doesn't apply to a primary election, but there's a 10-day window after election day where that ballot can come in. That's for obvious reasons. If you're trying to get your ballot back from a forward operating base in Afghanistan, you get a little more leverage. And actually that all began through like a lot of these policies do, through a lawsuit that was filed 30 years ago. In any event, so yeah, in the state of Florida, your ballot has to reach our office no later than 7 p.m. on election day. And so what we've seen in other states is they have different policies. You mentioned Washington, Oregon, Colorado. Those are, that's, and their voters are comfortable with that. And my personal belief, I think they do a pretty good job, but it's not something that you can stand up in a month or 2 months or even 6 months. It's just, there's, people, there's a lot that goes into that, and make sure you do it right. The last thing that you want to do is make some huge policy change on the fly, and then see after the fact that, boy, we weren't really prepared for that. So
No, that's
I think that my colleagues and I are preparing as best we can. That one of the things is, I know you all deal with each day, is the uncertainty of it all. We don't know where we're going to be. We don't know what the environment's going to be on August the 17th, the night before the election, or November the 2nd. So we have to, we contingency plan all the time. And so that's what we're doing right now.
Well, let me ask this question, because obviously there's a primary election August 18th, and then of course, is it November 3rd is election day, I believe?
Right.
November 3rd. So there's right now, I believe the overseas vote, mail ballots were mailed last week. And I believe this Friday, the domestic vote by mail ballots for the primary are being mailed. So let me ask you this. So those ballots go out, folks start to cast their ballots, return them back to you. But suddenly, just hypothetically, if the COVID really spiked and it was really a hard lockdown, everything was shut down, what would happen if the governor said, look, we can't do in-person voting? Would you have the capacity and the ability and the staffing to, on the fly, find some other mechanism for the people to vote?
So, first of all, I don't think that would happen. I think you would almost always, there'd be a scenario where you'd have to have some type of in-person voting, because there's some people as of now that are just going to need it. But in a hypothetical situation, right, what we did is we bought supplies early, as far as the mailing. So when you're mailing ballots, you've got two envelopes, and you have a secrecy sleeve that goes out. So we went ahead and purchased what we think it would take us through the general election. So in this scenario, if something like that happened in the primary, we have enough supplies on hand. One of the other things that's a relatively recent phenomenon that started in basically 2008, here, at least where we implement, is we have something that's called ballot on demand, where we literally can print our own ballots in our office.
Right.
If you've ever early voted, that's how your ballot gets produced. It used to be that, or if you go on election day, they go turn around and tear a ballot off of a pad. But if you go to early vote, it's connected to the electronic poll books, and then because we have to pull up your particular ballot style, so it prints on demand as you're standing there. We have ballot stock, and it prints on demand. We've got the capacity to do that on a larger scale in our office. So if we were needed to be able to plus that up, we can do that as well. So in a scenario like that, we could, just a matter of adjusting staffing, but we would be well positioned to be able to handle a sort of a last minute surge in vote by mail. And one of the other things is we're very blessed in our county that we have a regional mail facility, and I think people perhaps people take that for granted, but let's give you a scenario. If you're in Okaloosa County and literally you want to send a letter across the street or down the block, that letter has to go from the mailbox to the letter carrier over to Pensacola, and then reverse it to get across the street. Here in Escambia County, what we often see is we'll deliver our mail to the business, the BMEU there on Jordan Street. And literally, it'll start hitting mailboxes oftentimes the next day. That's huge. And I talked to some of my colleagues in Central and South Florida, and they talk about first class mail taking a week to travel. And so when you start building in, okay, that means that I have to allow for a week for that ballot to get to somebody, and then a week for it to come back. That becomes a challenge. So the reason I say all that is as soon as voters get their ballots, the sooner that they return them back to the elections office, the better. Also, there's a process if there's a problem with it, namely if you forget to sign your ballot, if your signature doesn't match, there's now a cure process in place. But again, the more time that you have to be able to cure your ballot, the better. So like I said, I think we're well positioned, as we're as well positioned as any state to be able to deal with the intricacies of dealing with something like this. And I know I'm kind of filibustering here, but one of the other things I wanted to make sure your listeners and your constituents and my constituents here is that we're still looking for poll workers. So anybody who's voted in person knows that, our poll workers tend to skew a little on the more senior side. And we don't go out and self-select. We don't say, hey, we're looking for, those that are 65 and over. It's just a natural, and it's not just us. It's around the state and around the country. And there's a good reason for that. They're very good and dependable. They're dedicated. They see this as part of their service to their fellow citizens. They're reliable. They show up and they do a good job. Unfortunately, they tend to fall into that category where they can, just by virtue of their age, be more at risk than somebody who's, say, 25 years old.
Sure.
So we have started seeing some of those folks have and they do it. They're sad to do it. They say, look, I just can't. So we're looking to backfill, and we do that constantly already, but we're starting to see a little bit greater need. And I've already communicated with Administrator Gilley and asked, and I know that we've already seen some results of that, as well as Mayor Robinson, where we're encouraging employers to allow their employees to go out and work the polls. We're already starting to see the fruits of that. The governor, in his executive order, has agreed to give state employees administrative leave to go work the polls.
That's awesome.
I don't know how much. We've seen at least a handful of those. I don't know if we've seen those come in. But the bottom line is, if you are willing and able to go work the polls on election day, we'd love to have you, and just call our office at 595-3900, and we'll do the rest.
Right on. So let's talk about the precincts on election day. We've all done it. We've all been there. It's a bustling crowd. There's excitement in the air, but there's really not a whole lot of social distancing. I mean, so tell me this year, David, how is the poll and the precincts at the ground level going to be different? Obviously, I'm assuming the folks will be wearing masks, I would assume. And I would also assume that you would encourage voters to wear masks. Number one, are you going to provide masks? People want to know. And number two, are you going to mandate they wear the masks as they go in and vote?
I'm not a lawyer, but we're at this point, we're not going to mandate that a voter wear a mask when they're exercising their constitutional right. That could change, but as of now, no. We will. We're encouraging voters to bring whatever PPE they have with them. We'll have hand sanitizer available. We have, we're changing some things. Actually, we just started our in-person poll worker training yesterday. So for instance, those, if you've ever early voted, or actually voting on election day now, when you sign in, you know that you sign an electronic signature pad. You used to sign like a paper register. So there's an electronic stylus that goes along with that. And so we started doing some research, and we found that they have these basically like big Q-tips that you can use, and because it's just pressure, so you can use those to sign your name. So what that does, of course, is that they're disposable. So each voter that comes in is going to sign their signature pad with basically a giant Q-tip rather than this electronic stylus. So you don't have to. You minimize that touch. Our poll workers, of course, will be issued masks. We also have face guards that we acquired through the help of Eric and his team. I don't know at this point if we're going to mandate that, because anybody who's had one of those on for any extended period of time, but we definitely will have the voters will be issued masks. We're encouraging voters actually to bring their own pen with them, which is different than we've done in the past to mark their ballot. And there's a reason for that. There's a particular pen that the scanners like, but in reality, it'll read almost anything as long as it's not red. So we're encouraging voters to bring their own pen with them. Of course, that then minimizes the sharing of pens. And so then we're going to monitor the crowd level inside. So what you may see, and I want to make sure folks understand this, that if you see a line outside your polling place that you normally don't see a line, don't let that discourage you. All that means is the folks are stationed a little bit further outside. There's still the same number there, where previously, they were kind of bunched up inside, maybe in a hallway or inside the actual room, waiting for the next available voting booth. And so those are kind of some of the things that you'll see. And of course, as always, we try to get people in and out as quickly as possible. And fortunately, particularly for this primary, there's not a lot on the ballot. In fact, it's one of the other things is we have 50,000 of our voters that are not eligible to vote in this primary election.
Right.
And that's a combination of because Florida holds closed primary elections, as well as because we have single member districts, unlike your colleagues in Santa Rosa and Okaloosa County, where the entire county gets to vote on all 5 county commissioners and all 5 school board members. That's not the way it happens here in Escambia County. So you have some, districts 2 and 4 don't have county commission or ECUA on the ballot. Both of our school board members that were up for election went in unopposed. You don't have any countywide Democratic primaries or nonpartisan contests. So it's kind of not a hodgepodge, but there's pockets of the county and precincts where you may only have all Republicans are going to have something to vote on because of the countywide primary for Congress, and then both of the House seats have a Republican primary. But then it's sort of pockets of precincts where you may only have Republicans that are eligible to vote in the primary.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of our elections. Let me ask you this about turnout. I know, and in case people don't know, you go to EscambiaVotes.com, and they have a lot of statistical information that you can look at, historical breakdown, demographic breakdown of each district. And then you can get a lot of information from there. But when you look at the historical turnout in these elections, I know you guys probably study it after the fact, David. Oftentimes these primaries are very, very lightly participated. I guess that's the politically correct term that I'll use. But something like COVID-19, is that going to push this down, or is that going to push people out? What's your gut on that?
Well, one of the things one of the things that you see, and again, people can have their own views about absentee or mail balloting, but one of the things that you see, people that study this stuff and is that actually the turnout, the greater percentage you have of people that vote by mail, it tends to elevate turnout. So we'll see. For instance, if you look at the presidential primary, again, thinking where we certainly weren't in the middle of it. We're kind of on the front end of the COVID. Even then, we had, I think, a 13 percentage point increase in the percentage of people who voted by mail. We already have 45,000 vote by mail requests for the general election and the primary. And that is certainly going to increase. So I think potentially, that could be a mitigating factor that if we send a ballot to somebody again who requested it, there's a pretty good likelihood that they're going to return that ballot versus if they didn't. And then what's going to motivate them to take the time either to go early vote or go to the polls on election day, particularly if there's maybe not a ton on their ballot. There's a lot of places in the county where there's only one contest, and then again other places there's nothing on your ballot. So we're going to send out sample ballots to everybody who's eligible to vote in the election. We're, as you said, later this week, or may kick into early next week, where we're going to finish getting our initial vote by mail ballots out the door. But we'll start seeing those come back. So I'm hopeful. I always try to emphasize to particularly younger voters, because in non-presidential general elections, it's just a statistical reality that the younger you are, the less likely it is that you're going to go vote.
Right.
And so one of the things I stress is that this is a great example where there's several contests that are what we call universal primary contests. 2 county commission seats, 2 ECUA seats, where literally the next person, the person that's going to be elected is going to happen in the primary. There is no general election. So the entire election is going to happen in that primary. So if you care about who's sitting, in county commission seats or ECUA seats, or, municipal seats like the City of Pensacola, Town of Century, then a lot of times those things are either literally or for the most part, decided in the primary election. So they're extraordinarily important.
Yes, yes, they are. That's a great point that you made. A lot of folks don't realize that. They think there's a runoff. Explain the nuanced difference. When I was a school board member and I was in several races with multiple people, if I didn't get to 50%, it meant that it would be a runoff to the general. But that's not the case in a closed Republican only primary. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. So we get down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but in essence, you first of all you have to know the difference between a partisan primary and a nonpartisan primary. School board, municipal contests are nonpartisan primaries, and so the person that gets elected needs to get a majority of the vote. And the way that in a nonpartisan contest, and so what happens if you have 5 people that want to be school board member, then they hold a primary, or even if there's just 2, you hold a primary. And then if nobody gets 50% plus 1, then the top 2 would advance to the general election. And that person then would get a majority. On the primary side, remember in partisan primaries, what you're doing is you're selecting nominees from a political party. That's the purpose of primary elections. And so if there's 5 Republicans that want to be sheriff, or 4 Democrats that want to be state rep, then the concept is in that primary that the Democrats get to decide who their preferred candidate, and the Republicans decide, and that's plurality. So you could win that primary with 25% of the vote, as long as it's one more vote than the next, and then that person then advances to the general election, where they would need to get a majority in order to be able to become. And sometimes they're facing just a write-in candidate, or maybe they're facing someone from the other political party plus a couple of nonpartisan candidates. So there did used to be runoff elections, primary runoff elections in the state of Florida. They started suspending those back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then they finally did away with them legislatively sometime in the late 2000s. So that's why you don't see those primary runoffs anymore. But then in the case of those 4 universal primary contests, if this was an amendment that was done to the Constitution back in '92, that said that if only members of one political party qualify for a partisan contest, so you have 4 Republicans that qualify for county commission and nobody else, so no write-in candidates, no nonpartisans, no third parties, then because that contest will literally be decided, not de facto decided, but literally decided in the primary, then that primary is opened up to all candidates regardless of party affiliation.
Yep. And I understood that, but I think there was some.
Oh, sure.
That didn't quite understand it. Well, okay, so the total number of precincts. I know in my district, there's been some consolidation. A lot of the precincts went together to the fairgrounds. Tell us about countywide, so folks that might be watching this from all over the county will know. Are we going to have the same number of precincts that we did, with the exception of the long-term care facilities that, for obvious reasons?
Yep. Yeah, so we've got 80 precincts. Some of them are co-located. We don't have a ton. We actually have a lot fewer co-located precincts than a lot of other counties in the state. But there's a handful. You think like over in East Hill, 40 and 41 there, that will be back at the senior center in Bayview Park. But for the most part, we have 80 precincts, and I think there's probably about 74, 75 actual polling locations because of the handful that are co-located. The one thing, actually, your district was the only one that we've actually added a precinct,
right?
Literally since I've been supervisor, so 15 years. And that was, of course, in the Beulah area, precinct 43, and that just got so big. We were up over, I think we were approaching 7,000 registered voters in that district, and that in the church that we used there was very good, but it just became such that we felt like we needed to, particularly going into a presidential election, we needed to stand up a new polling place. But basically, so what we did there is we used 9 Mile Road as the dividing line, because it circled, basically it was like a circle around Navy Federal in that area, and nature trail. So basically we used 9 Mile Road as the dividing line, and created a new precinct there north of 9 Mile Road. So you have people that were south of 9 Mile Road in precinct 43 are still there, and then the people north are now in precinct 114, and there's a new polling place there for them. But we stood that up in the presidential primary, and of course notified all the voters of that as well. But for the most part, everything else is, as we sit here today, knock on wood, is status quo from the presidential preference primary. One of the things we were looking at trying to get out of, we're only in 3 schools. We're only in 3 more schools. Our goal at the beginning of the year was and I worked with Superintendent Thomas on this, to try to get out of the schools. There's a host of reasons why they're not, a lot of people look at them as really good, and they're okay they're very good if there's nothing else going on. Right. But if you're trying to balance out your mission of educating children and then worrying about having to stand up a polling place, you can have some conflict there. They've been a good partner over the years, but we've gradually been doing what we can to get out of the schools. But because of everything else that's going on, I've talked to the superintendent, and I think we're in agreement that we're going to keep those 3 last schools that we're in, at least through the end of this year. And then the other thing, again, it's probably a topic for another day, is again, one of the things that I think is getting lost with all the rest of the news right now is we have redistricting.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Everybody, we have the decennial census that's going on right now, and then of course what happens after that is then all of that data gets processed by the federal government, and then once that data, and then that gets pushed down to the state legislature, and then down to the counties, where and that's particularly important in places where you have single member districts like we do here in Escambia County. Yep. Where you all, the Board of County Commissioners, as well as the school board in the city of Pensacola, will then have to redraw district lines to adjust to population shifts, and that can be an interesting process. And
it
so
was
that's
last
something.
time. It was.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So what you'll see then is you will definitely see precincts and districts that are going to be different in 2022 than they were in 2020. It's funny that's not getting really any. I mean, again, for obvious reasons, but the census is going on right now, and that data. It's important that people respond to that census for a host of different reasons, but one of the main reasons is that data is utilized to see the population shifts within the county, and then you all, the county commission and the school board will use that data to make adjustments to the districts.
David Stafford, thank you so much for being here this morning. See, it's amazing. We do this and an hour goes by like that. So much great information that you just put out for the people. Supervisor of Elections, David Stafford, thank you so much for being here. Janice Gilley, I know you wanted to tag in.
I say something.
Yes, please.
I did want to go back. I appreciate everything that David said, because I mean, I think it's a testament to his integrity and the job that he has done. The fact that he's going to serve his 5th term unopposed. I think for anyone in an elected office to serve 5 terms unopposed, or at this point, is just like I said, a pure testament to his integrity and his ability to do his job so well, and to do it in such a way that he doesn't have to face a lot of criticism and a lot of conflict. And so I just appreciate David and what he's done for the past I guess 15, 20 years now. I don't know. So I appreciate him. And he's always been in public service. I did want to mention to you that I did get some answers about the Walton County testing on the inmates.
Okay.
And they did test our inmates based on that there were already symptoms and sickness in the units. So it was not just a, hey, who wants to get tested situation. So I did want to mention that, because I do know that folks are being very careful about the number of tests that we have, and the utilization of testing folks, when there may not necessarily be symptoms in those units. So okay. Yeah, so I did want to make that clear, that it wasn't just an opportunity to, hey, let's get tested. It did. There were circumstances under which that did happen.
Thank you for clarifying that. Well, again, Janice, thank you for your time. Eric Gilmore, great to see you again. We're gonna definitely have you on now that we're back in the whole the COVID thing. We're talking about the dashboard, so we'll probably have you back. Hopefully, you're available to be with us. Appreciate you being here. And again, David Stafford, thank you so much for your time, and good luck going forward. Got an election coming up soon, and then another one right behind it. So It'll be fun, like it always is. All right, and
Thanks. Come help us work the polls.
Yeah.
Tell them to come
I
help
would
us.
love to. I'd love the
All right.
break.
y'all have a great rest of the week, and thank you for being here this morning.